My name is Margaret Stevens, and at 71 years old, I pulled off the greatest deception of my life to expose my family's true nature. When I suspected my children only valued me for my money, I convinced them I had Alzheimer's disease. What I discovered about their real plans while they thought I was losing my mind will shock you to your core. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on a family that saw me as nothing more than a walking inheritance, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever wondered whether your family truly loves you or just tolerates you for what you can give them, hit that like button, because this story will show you exactly how to find out the truth. Let me start from the beginning, when I first began to suspect that my children's sudden interest in my well-being wasn't as genuine as it appeared. I live in a beautiful colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut, the same house my late husband Charles and I bought 43 years ago. Charles was a successful investment banker, and I worked as a real estate agent until we started our family. Through smart investments and careful saving, we built a substantial estate worth approximately $12 million. Charles passed away 18 months ago from cancer, leaving me alone in our big house with more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. We have 2 children, Rebecca, 45, who works as a marketing director in Manhattan, and Michael, 42, a struggling artist who's never quite found his footing financially. In the months following Charles's funeral, I noticed a dramatic change in my children's behavior toward me. Suddenly, Rebecca was calling twice a week instead of twice a month. Michael started visiting every Sunday, bringing flowers and asking detailed questions about my health and finances. At first, I was touched by their attention. Grief has a way of bringing families together, I thought. But as weeks turned into months, their questions became more pointed, and their concern felt increasingly calculated. "Mom, have you thought about updating your will?" Rebecca asked during one of her visits, trying to sound casual as she flipped through a magazine. "Are you sure you can handle all these financial decisions on your own?" Michael would add, eyeing the stack of investment statements on my kitchen counter. They started suggesting I needed help managing my affairs, hinting that I was becoming forgetful and confused. When I'd misplace my reading glasses or forget where I'd put my car keys, normal things that happen to everyone, they'd exchange meaningful looks and suggest maybe I should see a doctor about my memory issues. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner last year. I was in the kitchen checking on the turkey when I overheard Rebecca and Michael talking in hushed tones in the dining room. "She's definitely getting worse," Rebecca was saying. "Did you see how she forgot she already asked us about the cranberry sauce 3 times? "We need to start thinking seriously about next steps," Michael replied. "The house alone is worth over $2 million, not to mention all the investments." "I've been researching memory care facilities," Rebecca continued. "Once we can get power of attorney, we can start liquidating some assets to pay for her care." I stood frozen by the kitchen door, a turkey baster in my trembling hand, as my children discussed my future like I was already dead. "How long do you think we have?" Michael asked. "Hard to say. Could be months, could be years. But we need to be prepared. I've already spoken to a lawyer about the guardianship process." That's when I realized my children weren't concerned about my health. They were concerned about securing their inheritance. The sudden attention, the pointed questions, the suggestions about my memory, it was all part of a plan to have me declared incompetent so they could control my finances. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If my children wanted to believe I was losing my mind, I would give them exactly what they expected to see. The next morning, I began my performance. I started small. During our weekly phone calls, I'd repeat myself occasionally or ask the same question twice. I'd pretend to forget common words, pausing mid-sentence with a confused expression. When Rebecca visited, I'd call her by her sister's name, though I don't have another daughter, and then apologize with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, honey. I don't know where my head is lately," I'd say, watching her eyes light up with what she probably thought was concern, but looked more like satisfaction to me. Within a few weeks, my children's visits became more frequent and their questions more urgent. They started bringing legal documents for me to sign, claiming they were routine paperwork for insurance or tax purposes. "Mom, this is just to make sure all your accounts are properly listed for tax reasons," Michael would say, sliding papers across my kitchen table. I'd squint at the documents, pretending to have trouble reading, then sign them with a slightly shaky hand. In reality, I was reading every word carefully and consulting with my own lawyer, Robert Chen, who was the only person who knew what I was really doing. "You're playing a dangerous game, Margaret," Robert warned me during one of our secret meetings. "If they really do try to have you declared incompetent, this could backfire." "Then you'll testify that I'm perfectly competent," I replied. "Besides, I need to know exactly what they're planning. This is the only way." As my fake symptoms became more pronounced, my children's true personalities emerged. Rebecca started talking to me like I was a child, using a patronizing tone and speaking slowly as if I couldn't understand normal conversation. "Mom, remember we talked about this yesterday?" she'd say with exaggerated patience when I'd pretend to forget our previous conversation. Michael became increasingly impatient with my confusion, sighing heavily when I'd ask him to repeat something or act uncertain about simple tasks. But the most revealing moments came when they thought I couldn't hear or understand them. They stopped being careful about their conversations around me, discussing my condition and their plans for my money as if I were already gone. During one particularly enlightening visit in March, Rebecca brought her husband David along. They thought I was napping in my recliner when they started talking in the kitchen. "The doctor confirmed it's definitely Alzheimer's," Rebecca was telling David, though I'd never been to any doctor for memory issues. "How long before you can get guardianship?" David asked. "Michael's lawyer says we need more documentation, but probably within 6 months. We've already got her signing papers that give us access to her accounts." "What about the house?" "That's the tricky part. We'll probably need to sell it to pay for memory care, but there should be plenty left over for the inheritance." I listened in growing horror as they discussed my future, a future that involved me being shipped off to a facility while they divided up my life's work. That evening I called Robert and told him I was ready to end the charade. "I've heard enough," I said. "Set up a family meeting for next week. Tell them it's about updating my will." "Are you sure you're ready for this confrontation?" Robert asked. "More than ready. It's time they learned exactly who they've been trying to manipulate." The family meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at Robert's office. I told Rebecca and Michael that my lawyer wanted to discuss some changes to my estate planning, which sent them both into a frenzy of excitement. "This is perfect timing," Rebecca whispered to Michael as we waited in Robert's reception area. "With her condition getting worse, this might be our last chance to make sure everything's properly arranged." Michael nodded eagerly. "Did you bring the power of attorney papers?" "Already signed and notarized," Rebecca replied, patting her purse. "Once this will meeting is over, we'll have everything we need." When we were called into Robert's office, my children wore expressions of barely contained anticipation. They probably thought they were about to become very wealthy. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began formally. "Margaret has asked me to arrange this meeting to discuss some important changes to her estate planning." "Of course," Rebecca said sweetly. "We just want what's best for Mom, especially given her condition." "Yes, about that condition," Robert said, glancing at me. "Margaret, would you like to explain?" I looked at my children's expectant faces and felt a mixture of sadness and anger. These were the people I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for, and they'd been planning to steal my independence and my dignity for money. "There's something you both need to know," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong. nothing like the confused, halting speech they'd grown accustomed to. Rebecca and Michael exchanged glances, probably wondering why I sounded so different. For the past 6 months, I continued, I've been pretending to have Alzheimer's disease. The room fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. What do you mean, pretending? Rebecca asked slowly. I mean, I've been acting, I said clearly. There's nothing wrong with my memory. There never was. Michael's face went white. But the doctor said, What doctor? I asked. I never saw any doctor about memory problems. You told people I had Alzheimer's without any medical diagnosis. Rebecca was starting to understand the implications. You've been faking it this whole time? Every confused moment, every repeated question, every time I called you by the wrong name, all of it was an act. I pulled out a small recording device and placed it on Robert's desk. Including this recording of your conversation last week about selling my house and putting me in a memory care facility. I pressed play, and their own voices filled the room, discussing my future with cold calculation. As they listened to themselves talking about liquidating my assets and dividing my inheritance, both of my children's faces went through a range of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and finally, growing panic. When the recording ended, Rebecca tried to salvage the situation. Mom, you have to understand, we were just trying to plan for your care. We thought you were sick. No, I said firmly. You thought I was weak and vulnerable, and you saw an opportunity to take control of my money. The only reason you've been visiting me, calling me, pretending to care about my health. It was all about the inheritance. Michael found his voice. That's not true. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because I heard you discussing how long I might live, and how soon you could get guardianship. That doesn't sound like love to me. Robert cleared his throat. There's more you both need to know. Those documents you've been having Margaret sign? I've reviewed them all. Several of them were actually attempts to transfer power of attorney and access to her accounts. What? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Fortunately, Robert continued, Margaret was fully aware of what she was signing and was acting under my legal advice. None of those documents are legally binding because they were signed under false pretenses. Your false pretenses about her mental capacity. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. Not only had their mother exposed their greed, but their attempts to gain control of her finances could be considered elder abuse. I've been fully competent this entire time, I said. Every conversation, every plan you made, every document you tried to trick me into signing, I was aware of all of it. Michael looked like he might be sick. Mom, please, we can explain. You already did explain, I interrupted. I heard you planning my future without consulting me. I heard you discussing my money like it was already yours. I heard you talk about putting me away so you could inherit my life's work. Rebecca was crying now, but I couldn't tell if it was from genuine remorse or just fear of consequences. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. First, both of you are going to return any documents I signed and any access you've gained to my accounts. They nodded quickly. Second, you're going to stop spreading lies about my mental health. I want public corrections made to anyone you've told about my supposed Alzheimer's diagnosis. Of course, Michael said desperately. Third, I'm making some changes to my will. The bulk of my estate will now be going to charity, with small provisions for both of you. If you can prove over the next 5 years that you're capable of loving me without expecting anything in return. Rebecca looked devastated. Mom, you can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. You've shown me that you only value me for my money. Now you'll have the chance to show me whether you can value me for who I am." "What about the house?" Michael asked weakly. "I'll be staying in my house, managing my own affairs, and living my life exactly as I choose," I said firmly. "If either of you can't accept that, you're welcome to stay away." The meeting ended with my children leaving in stunned silence. In the weeks that followed, I discovered just how extensively they'd been planning to take over my life. Rebecca had already researched memory care facilities and had preliminary conversations with several of them. Michael had gotten quotes from estate sale companies for selling my furniture and possessions. They'd been so confident in their plan that they'd started spending money they didn't yet have. Rebecca had put a deposit down on a luxury vacation home, thinking she'd soon have inheritance money to pay for it. Michael had quit his part-time job, expecting to be financially set once they gained control of my accounts. The aftermath of my revelation was swift and decisive. Some family friends who had been told about my condition were shocked to learn the truth. My bridge club, which I'd continued attending throughout my supposed illness, rallied around me with support and admiration for how I'd handled the situation. "We always wondered why you seemed perfectly fine during our games," my friend Eleanor told me. "You never missed a trick or forgot a card." My children's attempts to reconcile with me have been mixed. Rebecca has made genuine efforts to rebuild our relationship, visiting regularly and asking how I'm doing without any agenda about my finances. She's even brought her teenage daughter around more often, and I've been getting to know my granddaughter in ways I never had before. Michael has struggled more with accepting the new reality. He's still focused on money and what he sees as his lost inheritance. His visits are less frequent and often feel forced, like he's going through the motions of being a caring son without actually feeling it. As for me, I've never felt more free or more certain about my choices. At 71, I'm in excellent health, mentally sharp, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. I've started traveling again, something Charles and I had planned to do more of in retirement. I've also become involved with a local organization that helps protect elderly people from financial abuse. Ironically, using my experience to help others avoid what almost happened to me. The money I've designated for charity will go toward programs that support seniors' independence and protect them from exploitation by family members and caregivers. It seems fitting that my children's greed will ultimately help other elderly people maintain their dignity and autonomy. I still live in my beautiful house in Greenwich, surrounded by memories of my life with Charles and the knowledge that I successfully protected both my independence and my legacy. The inheritance my children were so eager to claim early will still exist when I'm gone, but it will go to causes that actually make the world better. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about deceiving my children, even though they were trying to deceive me. The answer is no. They showed me who they really were when they thought I was vulnerable, and I showed them the consequences of treating elderly family members like obstacles to overcome rather than people to love and respect. The most satisfying part of this whole experience wasn't the shock on their faces when I revealed the truth, though that was certainly gratifying. It was reclaiming my own power and proving to myself that I could outthink and outmaneuver people who underestimated me because of my age. My fake Alzheimer's experiment taught me valuable lessons about family, love, and the difference between genuine care and calculated manipulation. It also reminded me that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless, and that sometimes the best way to expose someone's true character is to let them think you can't stop them from revealing it. Have you ever suspected that family members were more interested in your money than your well-being? Have you ever felt like people underestimated you because of your age? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself, and you're never too vulnerable to fight back against those who would take advantage of you. Sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is simply being smarter than people think you are. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to trust your instincts about people's motivations, and to never let anyone convince you that age makes you powerless.